All right, good morning, everyone. This is our informed consent discussion. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good.
Good. Okay, so we'll start off with the Northeastern's website, their human subject research protection page. So our research is a little different. One of the first comments that Dr. Pierce made on our methods section was that the process for consent for medical records is different than kind of the conventional practice. So we dove into that problem and we got some answers, reached out to Dr. Pierce and also reached out to the HSRP team at Northeastern and spoke to them about our proposed study and got some good direction from them. So since our study involves retrospective analysis and gathering of medical records, it would fall under category 4. Highlight that here. So category 4 would be secondary research, uses of identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens for which consent is not required. A little bit more about category 4 I found on University of California, San Francisco's website, just kind of explaining that a little more. So medical records review and no subject contact. So it goes on to further state some research using data for medical records, such as retrospective record reviews, can be done without having contact with subjects. The IRB review process depends on the level of risk to subjects' privacy posed by the type and extent of PHI associated with the data set. So there's 2 forms required for this type of research we're doing. The first is the exempt self-determination application form, and the second is the research plan for exempt determinations. There is a third form, the exempt study participation information sheet, but that does not apply to our type of study. And before I go on and talk more about those forms, Dr. Pierce did send us an interesting article that kind of goes into some of the history and some of the policy surrounding using medical records without patient consent for research, and kind of how patients feel about that, because the various countries, states, even down to the local level, have different kind of laws and rules and regulations surrounding using medical records that are scrubbed of PHI. So this study looked at patients who had chronic illnesses and kind of asked them, how do you feel about your medical records being used for research without explicit consent? Kind of in the introduction here, it talks about how it can be cumbersome, if not impossible, to finding and seek consent from patients whose current or past medical records might be used. And it's an important policy question, is the degree to which medical records ought to be available to researchers and under what circumstances. The second paragraph talks about the IRB process for this, which is exactly kind of where our study falls, and various options exist for how medical records might be used in research. Current practice in many settings is for IRBs to allow researchers access to identifiable patient records without patient consent if the research is of minimal risk. Methods for protecting confidentiality are well outlined and identifiers are destroyed as soon as possible. So the details of the study looked at 602 patients with various illnesses, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, actually our main disease that we're looking at in our study, which is interesting, diabetes mellitus, HIV, breast cancer, and colon cancer, and posed to them, how do you feel about your records being used? And Some of the responses were varied, but some of them did answer with replies such as, if this is going to benefit other people with diseases, I'd be okay with it. This paragraph here talks about how if the research is further qualified, if they understood that their data was being protected and they knew who was gaining access, 71%, excuse me, thought this was a good idea, saying things like, if the measures actually worked, then I would say yes. They talked about using approved, when asked if they approved of a computer database set up anonymously. More than 86% of individuals thought it was a good idea. And researchers also found that because they were talking about patients with chronic illnesses who were suffering greatly at the hands of their illness, they were more willing to let their data be used without their consent, because they know firsthand how debilitating it can be and how research could benefit others. Another thing that the researchers proposed was asking for blanket consent for research purposes upon admittance to the hospital. But this is still a highly debated topic because future consent has been questionable, and patients don't exactly know what they're consenting for. So there's still a lot of, the jury's still out as far as that goes in the ethical realm of research. And kind of their conclusion was that institutions must scrutinize requests for private information and determine it on a case-by-case basis. So that was a really good article that really paralleled well with our study. So I'll move on to the forms that are required to be filled out. Does anyone have anything to add?
No, you did a really thorough job. Thank you for looking into that.
Yeah, no problem. The people at Northeastern were super helpful. Andrea talked to me for like an hour on the phone. It was great. So this is the first form. This is the exempt self-determination application form that we would require to fill out. So the first thing is it kind of checkpoints you like research that is not eligible for self-determination. So minors, that would be, it's stop sign, that would put us on hold. We're not looking at minors. We've specifically outlined the criteria of our study that's going to be over the age of 18. The second point is deception, manipulation used in the initial consent process. No. So we would pass that, and then will physiological measurements be used? I got some clarification on this from Andrea because I was a little confused when I read that at first. So what this bullet point would mean is, are you going to be showing a patient an image and you're going to be having them on an fMRI, or are you going to be doing a sweat test on a CF patient and then making them go through that test? Or are you going to be having someone run on a treadmill for a mile and then take their blood pressure and heart rate? We're not doing anything like that. So we can.
So it basically just means we're not performing a physical test.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. I was kind of confused when I read that too. And she's like, it is kind of confusing on the form. So let me explain that more. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't mean like just if someone has like an MRI in their record, well, we can't use it. It means like we would say you're putting someone through an MRI, and the example she gave, like you're putting them through an MRI and you're showing them like pictures of like spiders and snakes and things like that. And you're seeing like, are there fear centers going off in their brain, something like that. Okay, that it brings us to which category our research would fall under, which is category 4, secondary research for which consent is not required. The rest of this form, I don't need to go through line by line. It's basic information about the primary investigator, research team, some clarifying questions at the end. This would be submitted to Northeastern's HSRP, and they would look at our study and they would sign it off as if it meets the exempt self-determination criteria. The second form is, okay, we've given you, we've said this research qualifies for exempt determination. How are you going to carry this out, team? So this is that form. And we start off with, the goals of the research, summary of the purpose of the research team, identifying other organizations that are involved. This is an important piece in our study because these are the hospitals that we would be soliciting the records from. And then it has a category here for, what data source we're going to be using for secondary analysis, which is medical records and charts. And then it talks about what permissions do we have to access and analyze the data. So this would be the permission that would be provided from the healthcare institution. And then it talks about our recruitment sample. We're looking for African Americans over the age of 18. Talks about our experimental group, our control group. Talks about our recruitment some more. This asks about the exempt study participation information sheet. That does not apply to our study. So these two are both not applicable. And kind of the meat of our proposal here is how we're going to protect this information, which is really what the hospital is going to be wanting to know, and how we're going to work collaboratively with them to make sure that we protect this information. So I'll kind of kick that off to Holly, who's going to talk about that some more.
So there aren't any physical risks to the participants in this study, but there's possible risk of loss of confidentiality, which we outlined below. So all the data involved in the study will be transferred by encrypted devices and secure web applications. I mentioned REDCap as a secure web application, which has HIPAA compliance, because that's something I've worked with in the past. And then in the event that there is a data breach, IRB will be notified immediately following discovery of the breach, and any unsecured protected health information that's revealed. Notice will be provided in written form by first-class mail, email, and shared on the study homepage for at least 90 days as recommended. In the event of a data breach, a toll-free number would be provided and remain active for at least 90 days, where people can call in to find out if their data was involved in the breach. And then an investigation would be done, and we would figure out how to kind of mitigate potential harm that's done from this potential data breach. In terms of confidentiality, the study works with retrospective data, so participating institutions would provide the medical record information by a secure web application, and then we would have a script that would be written to parse the information that we are looking for. And this would create separate files that basically removes all the information that we don't need, so any personal health information. And then to kind of de-identify the data, we would give each medical record kind of their own name. So I gave an example, control HD 001. So it's a code for each person. And then this would be stored in a separate device that's encrypted to match up the files again later if we need to. This is kept in a separate location that's secure, and we would keep this for at least 6 years as required by federal regulations. And in terms of transferring data, all the data will be stored on institution computers. So anything Northeastern, nothing would be on our personal computers or laptops. The key matching up the data would be stored in a secure encrypted file, and any information that's not relevant to the study will be promptly destroyed. And then afterwards, any information that we have will be available to the public via an open domain data sharing repository following the completion of the study. Is there anything else that I missed?
I think you covered it all. Does anyone have anything else?
I think that really covers it. Like, thank you guys so much for the work. I don't fully understand this, so I'm glad you guys were able to get it.
All right, we'll go ahead and Stop the recording now.